Welcome to another football podcast where I will be talking about the NFL news and college football news. Now, in the NFL in the past couple of days, we have learned that head coach Mike McCarthy's job might be in jeopardy. Mike McCarthy is the coach of the Dallas Cowboys. He is the former coach of the Green Bay Packers. He won a Super Bowl in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. But just recently, today actually, he lost a playoff game to the San Francisco 49ers. And word has it that his job is in jeopardy for his own offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore. Now, I really like Kellen Moore. And McCarthy has just been not the best head coach. There have been things like how he lied to get his job. I didn't really like that. But it's not because of the bad things about Mike McCarthy, because there aren't many, that I would prefer Kellen Moore to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I like Kellen Moore a lot. I like how young he is, his offensive play calls, and he is one of the more desirable people that other NFL teams are looking for to be a head coach. Next, Russell Wilson, quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks, is expected to explore his options in the NFL this offseason. Now, Russell Wilson just had his first losing season with the Seahawks, and now he's expected to explore his options. This is not looking very good for Seattle fans. Wilson is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, and on the right team, he can be one of the best. His offensive line really hurt him this year, and I'm just wondering where he could go. I think he could go to the Denver Broncos, the New Orleans Saints, Washington football team, the Browns, the Colts, or even the Steelers. Now I'm going to talk about each one of those. If he went to the Denver Broncos have one of the more stacked rosters in the whole NFL. But quarterback is the position they are really struggling. They had Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. Neither of those are very good quarterbacks. Drew Lock probably should have started more than he did, but Teddy Bridgewater never really did anything special with the ball, throwing-wise. He had receiver Jerry Jeudy, and he never really utilized him. But with Russell Wilson, that roster could shine, and he could really get the ball to Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick and Noah Fant and all of those guys. Next was the New Orleans Saints. Basically, the Saints, they have quarterback Jameis Winston. But Winston tore his ACL, and Wilson is a better option at quarterback than Jameis. So I think they could try and get him, but I don't think that's one of the more likely places he will go. The Washington football team, they are looking for a quarterback. Taylor Heinicke, he was a solid duct tape quarterback. He is a great backup quarterback, but I don't think he's a starting caliber quarterback. And I think with that young defense, even though they didn't shine in 2021 like many expected them to, I think the Washington football team can be very good with Russell Wilson. Now, the Browns, I think they'll stick with Baker Mayfield for one more year, but if they were really looking to, they could go to Russell Wilson. The Indianapolis Colts, they are one of the more likely teams that I think he'll go to. Denver and Indianapolis. Indianapolis really struggled at quarterback with Carson Wentz. He wasn't awful, but he wasn't efficient like you want your quarterback to be. And I think with the quarterback, not only did they make the playoffs, but I think with a quarterback like Russell Wilson, they can make a run in the playoffs. Next, the defensive tackle for Tulsa, Jackson Player, has committed to Baylor. He committed at 7 o'clock on January 16th. Now, he lives 8 miles away from Baylor, so this was an obvious choice, but it was likely between Baylor and Arkansas. And Arkansas did not make the cut for Player. Now, in 2021, Player was one of the better players on the Tulsa defense. He recorded 50 total tackles, 15 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 1 fumble recovery. This is a very impressive stat line. He was a huge part of that Tulsa defense. They might not have won that many games at Tulsa this year, but that is not because of Jackson Player. Player will be a big help to that Baylor team. That Baylor team who was able to win the Big 12, who fought against Oklahoma State to win the Big 12 in the Big 12 championship game. Now, I love their head coach. He's a defensive mind, and I think Player can really impress him and hopefully start. Now, next, we have Wyoming corner C.J. Coldon. He is committing to Oklahoma. Oklahoma just now is getting head coach. Not just now, he has been there for a while. They have hired head coach Brent Venables out of Clemson. He was the former defensive coordinator. Now, Coldon, he was a big part of the Wyoming secondary. In 2021, he recorded 67 total tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, a sack, and 10 passes defended. He was definitely one of the better players on the Wyoming secondary that was solid in the Mountain West Conference. I think he can be a big help to the Oklahoma team that has recently lost a lot to the transfer portal, USC, since the loss of head coach Lincoln Riley to USC. He is a player that I'm going to look forward to watching at Oklahoma. Next, Miami, Florida. The Miami Hurricanes have been making pretty big moves in the portal over the past 2 days. They have got Clemson wide receiver Frank Ladson Jr. and Ole Miss running back Henry Parrish. Now, Ladson Jr., probably one of those 300, 400-yard guys at Miami. I like him a lot, and I think he'll do pretty well. He's not going to be your wide receiver one, I don't think, but I think he's going to be one of those consistent guys that can do pretty well. Now, Parrish Jr. was one of the starting running backs. I believe he was the starting running back at Ole Miss in 2021. He had 724 total yards and 3 touchdowns. He can make a pretty big impact on this Miami team. Miami team that really underperformed in 2021, but they have a new head coach, and they're getting players through the portal. And I think they can really, really improve from what they were last year. I think they can be, in a couple years, what we expected them to be last year. ACC champions, or contenders to be ACC champions. I like this a lot, and I think Miami do pretty good in 2022. Arkansas has been making big moves in the portal. They've got Alabama linebacker Drew Sanders and LSU corner Dwight McGlothern. They both committed to Arkansas. Drew was a 4-star prospect coming out of high school. He's played for Alabama. He got injured after a couple games and hasn't really played since. But now he has entered the portal, and it was between Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And Arkansas was able to come out on top and get Sanders. I think Sanders can be a really big asset to this team. They now have linebacker Bumper Pool, Drew Sanders. Those are a pretty good linebacking corps. They are losing Hayden Henry and Grant Morgan. And Dwight McGlothern is really, I think, a trade with LSU, right? 2 defensive backs for Arkansas, Joe Fouché and Greg Brooks Jr. both entered the portal, and they both winded up at Louisiana State University. Now, Dwight McGlothern enters the portal and heads to Arkansas, and I think Dwight is an automatic starter at corner. So now you're having Jalen Catalon, Dwight McGlothern, and Miles Slusher in that secondary. I think Arkansas the Arkansas secondary definitely upgraded today, but their defense as a whole made a huge step forward. Finally, Alabama quarterback Paul Tyson is transferring to Arizona State. Paul Tyson was a 4-star. He committed to Alabama, and now he's entered the portal. He's committed to Arizona State, where they already have a quarterback. But Jayden Daniels is their quarterback right now. He's decided to come back for one more year, but in 2021, Daniels was not a very good quarterback. He threw too many interceptions, not enough touchdowns. He was really just underwhelming. I expected him to be one of the better quarterbacks in the nation in college football, but that was not the case. I think Paul Tyson next year will start. I think he'll get a solid amount of play time this year if Jayden Daniels doesn't step up his play. And I think that Paul Tyson will be a pretty solid quarterback next year in 2022 with the Arizona State Sun Devils.